Hello everybody, welcome back to episode 78 of the Podcana podcast. This week we're going to be discussing day 1 set 6 decks and just going to be, going over our thoughts about the different deck archetypes. Maybe not going into the specific builds, but I do think it's important to talk about some of the new inclusions that we will probably see making their way into these deck archetypes as we begin to progress throughout set 6 and leading into the European Championship. I want to give a huge shout out to Heavy Play, the sponsor of this episode. They make their incredible CURV card sleeves that have rounded corners at one end of the sleeve. Never again will you accidentally shuffle cards upside down into your deck. They also have their EquipMag system, which connects their Playmat, Deckbox, and Dicebox all together. So no more rolling up your Playmat and rushing to your next table. Easy magnetic connection system for easy transport around locals and tournaments. Be sure to use code PODCANA to save yourself 10% off at checkout, and also use our link down below in the description. Once again, thank you to Heavy Play for sponsoring the video. Before we jump into this building section, Moyen, how has your week been within Lorcana? I assume you've been doing some early testing. I guess our viewers are probably curious for us two in particular, like we have the deck list submission very soon for this NA versus EU tournament. Now, we won't be actually playing the games until probably next week. I think it's very much like when we get time to play, we'll inform Pavel, and then, the games will be broadcast and stuff like that. But I am really excited for it, and it's cool that we've had this, bit of time before the sets actually come out to, mess around with some cards and do some play testing, online, I guess, or like in our own time, or using proxies, or whatever way you want to say it. But I think proxies are going to be something I'm going to be utilizing quite a bit for this event personally, because I'm not going to have all the cards I probably need for the decks. Although maybe I am. It's probably going to be the difference of like, oh, I need like a 4th super rare or a 4th rare from this new set that I just couldn't open if I'm opening some packs or boxes. But yeah, how's the testing been going so far without, without leaking anything to our competitors, right?
So as soon as all cards were revealed, since then I've been testing a lot. I kind of altered my entire sleep schedule so I can test with Americans when they get off work. Which isn't the most healthy thing in the world, like going to sleep at 5, 6 a.m. But it's what I'm willing to sacrifice a good sleep schedule to get the work in. Right now it's the testing goes in all sort of different directions. We have enough time where now most ideas seem at least worth exploring. And then if they don't work out, you can still come back to maybe what you towards a little bit safer, to what will probably work, some adjusted decks just from last sets. But right now it's also the time to test all the crazy ideas out there to see if there's any value in them. For the cross-continent challenge, I might not be able to play early rounds because suddenly I'm flying to the Philippines tomorrow for a parallel event that I was qualified to, but I was like not entirely qualified, but then someone got DQ'd and now I'm in. So now I travel to the Philippines tomorrow and then be there for like almost a week, and then I travel to the tournament in Italy, Bologna, where that tournament's unfortunately still set 5, but I'm still very much looking forward to it.
Oh, is it still set 5 because even because it's an unofficial event? Really? That's interesting.
Well, I'm maybe because it's unofficial, it was up to them, but from what I've heard, it's set 5.
That's a bit of a bummer, honestly, because I was considering. Unfortunately, I can't go now because I'm attending a different event. But a big reason as to why I would have considered really coming is because it gets me some really valid set 6 testing in before the EU Championships, right?
Yeah, for me as well, right? I would much prefer play set 6 to prepare for Continentals, but I'm still looking forward to meeting everyone, and like outside of the tournament might still hang out with some people and test set 6, and then in the tournament maybe jam some set 5 games. It's completely fine. And then it's only 2 weeks out from Continentals after that, so very busy times ahead.
Yeah, which I think is nice, because for me personally at least, it has been a little bit of a dry spell. I think I summed this. I was talking to one of my friends during the week about Lorcana, and they were just asking like, "Oh, is anyone coming to our last set 5 locals, and most people are like, no, we'll just wait until, whenever a new set launches, we always do a sealed event and everyone buys boxes, and that's just a bit of fun, you know what I mean? People are like, no, we're just going to wait for that. This might just be my opinion, and it could be like completely incorrect because I wasn't really playing many of the set championships because I was busy with a lot of other events, and I kind of already won the creator one, so I was like, I don't really want to compete too much for the Mirabelles and stuff like that. But in my opinion, I do get the sense that maybe these set championships just didn't hit as well as the other ones did. And that could be for multiple reasons. It could be the actual prize card, the promo card. Maybe some people didn't value it as much as the other ones. I'm not talking about just the actual price of selling the card, right? That is, of course, a factor, that the prizes aren't going to be worth as much as they were initially. But just not really a very powerful legendary card in general, so I don't know how many people wanted to kind of mess around with that. But attendance overall, from what I saw, was still like good. It was still healthy, but maybe still a little bit less. This could just be my opinion, but I'm curious how you felt the last, like, I don't know, like 4 weeks in Lorcana were, because I think what's really carried the meta and the hype and the competitive scene has been all of these other big unofficial tournaments that were happening, right? Like we had the Lorca Quest, we had a lot of the events in France, to be honest. France was really carrying the Lorcana scene, but without those and without the data and really kind of seeing stuff, there was only I say only, there was 2 DLCs for this set, but within Europe, I suppose the French made up for it with, okay, we're gonna have these cool unofficial tournaments, and of course NA gets the DLC Seattle. But maybe it's just my opinion that I felt that there was, without these tournaments, there was a bit of a dip. But maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah, no, I think for me I'm very happy that I was able to attend Seattle, so that I didn't experience that. But I think without Seattle, I might have also felt similar, where with like 4 weeks, no big tournament, you might feel a little bit less incentivized to really engage with the game as much.
Yeah. But yeah, with that, we're gonna quickly move into our spilled ink section, and then we're gonna be talking about some of these deck archetypes that have come before, that were quite meta within set 5, and then, as Moyen mentioned, maybe talk about some ones that we had some time to experiment with, or a general thoughts to see if we can see any new emerging deck archetypes coming in from the start of set 6 here. But to start us off, our first comment is from David Green. They say, I think Moyen misevaluated Sail the Azurite Sea. It is a card neutral, like One Jump. The main difference is it isn't a song, it is inkable, and it requires you to have a card you want to ink, but it can be a card drawn later. I think that in the world of Ursula Deceivers, this card is way better than One Jump, unless you have a ton of uninkables in your deck. So first of all, I'm not sure about the misevaluation part. I mean, you can speak to that and not myself, but I will say, in general, for this comment, I do like the point that, yes, it is a card that is not targetable by Ursula Deceiver. So if you really, really, really want your ramp on 2, I guess, then it's a valid option to have in the deck. But I mean, we'll be getting into this conversation a little bit later in terms of, what type of Sapphire decks you think you'll see this card played in. Maybe it's a few, maybe it's all. But yeah, what are your thoughts on the card in general? I guess maybe the comment.
Yeah, no, well, I don't quite remember how I misevaluated it last week. I'm pretty sure I wasn't. I mean, I did say I'm not as high on it as others. Where after another week of testing, I would stand by that. But I can totally see how that's like almost a difficult opinion to really grasp, because I think surface level, like, everyone agrees the card's great. But when you test with it more and really think about it, the upside is not very tangible. It's not very significant. So you correctly say both are card neutral. So when playing either, okay, assuming we don't care about wasting a card from our deck, which I don't. I guess drawing one and then inking one extra is kind of similar, but you have more control of it. But okay, disregarding that, because that's not very important. Both are card neutral. Which one would you prefer to play on 2? So Sail draws you a card and then forces you to ink an extra card, which can run you into more ink issues on a hand, especially if the card you draw off the sale is something you'd rather not ink, or especially an uninkable. The biggest upside to sale is you have this one spare ink to use. So I think a big reason for when sale will be better than something like a one jump on turn 2 specifically would be how likely or how much value can you gain out of this one spare ink that you now have access to that you wouldn't have access to with one jump. And then later in the game, let's say very late in the game, okay, probably I prefer sale. Maybe I have so much ink I can just cycle it. Maybe I can just ink it and that's fine. But I think before that, it's not so clear and obvious which one's better. It's not like turn 3, turn 4, turn 5. One of them is always going to be better than the other, as one jump enables great lines where you sing it, whereas the sale is not singable, but at least it's inkable. But honestly, I'm very happy about sale not straight up, because also just in deck building, because with sale on 2, you can run into these extra ink issues in comparison to one jump on 2. You also have to account for that and play less uninkables in a deck with sale than you would in a deck with one jump. So all of those things considered, I'm very happy that sale isn't straight up power creeping our current ramp options, but it's giving us an extra ramp option that has some upsides and some downsides, especially in decks that don't want to play too many uninkables and can make good use of the one spare ink. I would say yes, sale is better, but I think maybe in some other deck that might just not be the case.
I think that's fair. Next comment is from Timothy. They say Frank Karsten mentioned tutors specifically when it came to running over 60 cards. There could definitely be a world years from now where Lorcana has a bunch of tutors, in which case running over 60 cards becomes good. Yeah, I think that is something that Frank mentioned. I mean, Frank also mentions the difference between, the mana system within Magic and, of course, different deck archetypes and stuff like that. And I mean, if you want to learn more about that, I highly recommend, if anyone hasn't watched our episode with Frank, to go and watch it, because we spoke a lot. It was a very long episode, but very educational. I learned a ton myself. But yeah, I think everything that Frank said in that episode, we all agreed with, and it all made sense with me, at least logically. You know what I mean? So, do you agree with this, that if a lot more tutors come into the game, then you can suddenly start to run it over 60 cards?
Right, so just, I think, to clarify for everyone, I think tutor means just when you play a card where you can pick, literally hand-pick the card of your deck that you want.
Correct, yeah. You search your entire deck for a specific card that you need. Tutors are often still restricted, so, I mean, we have, I mean, this set is the first tutors that we've seen introduced into the game. Actually, I don't think it's the first one. I think we had the Madrigal one first. Or maybe that wasn't. I think that was a tutor, actually.
And we had... we had set 5, we also had the Merlin Intellectual Visionary, the 6-drop, 3/7 shift.
Oh, did he let you look anything in your deck?
Yeah, you just search for any card in your deck.
Okay. Well, I mean, like this person saying, right, we're starting to get some more tutors into the game, but some of them are restricted, like the 3-cost uninkable Ruby card that gets you location. There's the Hero Hamada, which isn't actually a tutor. It acts like a tutor, but it's worse because you look through your entire deck for, I think it's like a robot or an inventor character, and then you put it on the top of your deck. You don't even draw the card. So that's kind of a worse tutor. But maybe, again, this is a design of, well, maybe those cards are like super, super powerful. So like you have to wait a turn to draw it or whatever, or then you have to have another card to draw the card, right? So, yeah. It's interesting.
All right, and so just to round it off, the other tutor card we got was the Alma Madrigal, where when you play it, you can put a Madrigal on top of your shuffle deck. And all of these cards, so even when they don't let you like hand pick any card you want, they might incentivize you to have more options in your deck. Just not that you don't necessarily want to draw, but just so your tutor cards get better, because now this tutor card could tutor for something that you really, really want in a specific scenario. And if we get efficient, good tutor cards and a bunch of them, that's a very valid reason to go over 60. I don't think I would say that it's impossible for over 60 to ever be correct. I just don't think it has been really correct in the past.
Next comment is from Cuptime. They say, I feel like just limiting cards would be cooler than a total ban of certain cards or even rotation. So I actually want to clarify because we got a few comments about the whole rotation thing. And last week, Brendan mentioned that I know he mentioned himself and yourself more in particular, but I actually agree with the fact that I think rotation is actually going to be quite beneficial for Lorcana if it gets to that stage. And he mentioned that he believes that most people will probably be against rotation because they've either been burned from it in the past or they've heard stories, blah, blah, blah. And essentially, you know, the idea of rotation is people are like, okay, well, like I stop using cards that I've paid money for, I've spent, you know, I want to be able to use my cards I've bought. So we got a couple of comments in response to that. I think it's some really interesting to hear different people's opinions on it. They say, I feel like just limiting cards would be cooler than a total ban of certain cards or even a rotation. Just like limiting Flaversham and or Popsicle to 3 copies or something so it's still playable, but leaving options for new editions that can be better than limited versions of that draw engine. Same with like limiting Be Prepared to 2 and so on. So this type of limiting or banning or whatever you call it is like there's a name for it in Yu-Gi-Oh! They do it in Yu-Gi-Oh! Where it's like it's just like you can only run limited copies, or it's like limited banning of cards or whatever. I have seen this done on a few other types of games. I don't think we actually mentioned this in particular. I have heard of, there's the other one, it's actually happened in the Star Wars TCG that I play at the moment, where they have suspended a card. So they don't want to say they've banned it. They've pretty much banned the card, but they suspended the card because they feel, oh, you know, if it ever finds a place back in the meta, we'll bring it back in or whatever. So it's interesting that they decide to do this with cards rather than, you know, obviously in physical card games it's harder to do erratas or complete changes or whatever. The way they announced that in particular was actually quite weird because they pretty much said, yeah, from the start we missed this was, and like, oh, we knew this was a problem for ages. I think some people, it was interesting how people reacted to that, because there were some people that were like, thank God this was needed. I was one of these people that was like, okay, this change was needed. You know, imagine something so powerful. This type of deck wins 30, 40, 50% of all of your competitive events. There's clearly a problem, right? And then some people are like, oh, but like I spent so much money on like the best cards in this deck, and now all these cards are like worthless. So I understand people's opinion about the thing, right? You know, it's they're trying to do it beneficial for the game, but then people have spent so much money on these cards and stuff. But so I'll come back to this actual limited card stuff. What are your thoughts on this, Moyen?
Yeah, I'm not quite sure. I think just when a card is too powerful, then limiting the amount of copies you can play can sometimes be dangerous for the gameplay aspect of it, because then it feels even worse if your opponent draws the like more powerful card when they are not even allowed to play like more than 2 copies of it. Or like the most extreme scenario, like a card is limited to 1 single copy. And then if they draw that, like let's say it's a very good 3-drop, and they draw that on turn 3. Like, okay, you drew your 1 out of 60. That can be frustrating. So in general, I'm a little bit worried, but I'm sure it can still.
I've heard stories like that in Yu-Gi-Oh! And if anyone's played Yu-Gi-Oh! In the comments, please correct me, because I'm not very educated, but I have heard stuff of like, even if a card is limited to like 1 or 2 copies, of course, Yu-Gi-Oh! Has been out for many years, so people just play a card that tutors for that exact card, so it doesn't really matter that you only run 1 copy and not 4 copies if the rest of your cards are built upon literally just finding that card, playing it, and winning the game. But Yu-Gi-Oh! Is a completely different game as well at the same time. So, yeah, I'm just curious to hear people's opinions about it. But, yeah, the next one is from Unbox the Meta. They say, on the Lilo topic, if the card has to be played on the set phase, the card is far worse without the knowledge of wanting to play it after the draw phase. I think most readers assumed it was after the draw phase, as that's where most at the start of your turn effects happen live, even though theoretically it all happens in the set phase. So it should be happening in the set phase, technically. Yep. So like Castle Trigger, Beast Trigger, all of this should be, trigger Beast during the set phase, and then you draw your card for turn. Trigger your draws for your castles during the set phase, and then draw your, you know what I mean? That is what the start of the turn, and it's the same thing where you've got like the weird stuff of what is it? It's like like the 2-drop Flynn Sisu against the Diablo, because people are all like, okay, when does the Flynn trigger? When do I draw my card? And that type of stuff. So it's very important to know this. And when we brought this up last week, yeah, I do agree. I don't know if people know that is your opportunity to play it. You cannot draw your card and then say, I think I'll just play my Lilo from this card. It's like, you can't do that. You know what I mean? Yeah. And I think some people will be caught out doing that. I don't know about you, but some people won't know.
Yeah, no, you definitely can't do it. It definitely makes it worse. Mm-hmm. Card's probably still okay. But yeah, it is no longer an if it has to be played on set. We are certain it has to be played on set. And
correct.
Yeah, so you can't plan for, or sometimes the card you draw, like after seeing that, you will think, oh, if I knew I was going to draw that, I would have rather not spent my 2 ink on Lilo already. Mm-hmm. But that's the risk you'll have to consider when you decide to replay the Lilo of your discard.
For sure. Next comment we have is from Jo. They say, you've definitely helped me come around on the rotation concept. So this is interesting because this is somebody who is actually open to the rotation concept. They say, being new to TCGs, it just seemed bad and painful to invalidate old cards that I'd purchased and loved, but I totally understand how it helps the health of the game design without needing to beat the value of old cards with every new set. I really think that we get a ton of value out of the cards that we get to play with for so long, like keeping the game balanced and fun is way more important. So this is interesting to someone who's relatively new to TCGs, because I would imagine that people who are newer to the game would be opposed to this because they want to play with all of their cards. But It's interesting to hear somebody open to this, right?
Yeah, no, I mean, they were opposed to it at first, but listen to what we had to say.
They came around. Yeah.
I think a very important point the comment is making is, okay, as long as we get a ton of value out of the cards that we paid for, then it's okay. And I think I agree with that. It's like, probably, I don't know what the exact time frame is, but when a card comes out, you want there to be like a good amount of time where you can make use of that before something like a rotation would be to occur.
Yep. And I think I want to note that I was mentioning this comment, but if rotation does become a thing, which is something I believe will probably be beneficial for the game if they go down that route eventually, I do want to see an additional format alongside that in terms of a mode where people can play all of their cards. I think it's quite important to have that. I think it would feel really bad because you don't want to completely limit your player, like, because then you're literally nullifying all of your previous product if people can only, you know what I mean? So I think it's important that people realize when the rotation happens, at least I believe there should be, like, you know, the standard format, and then I think it's called vintage within Magic, where it's like everything, just to give people options, because people like options, right? People like different ways to play the game. People like Seal, people like Draft. So I think it is important, and I don't know any card game that would say, right, we're doing a rotation, screw all of your, like, completely screw all of your cards. I mean, you're making a face there. What are you?
No, it's just like, I don't know why it was such a joke in Hearthstone that it kind of felt like that in Hearthstone, where it's like, okay, cards out of rotation.
Even Hearthstone is,
sometimes old cards got like back into rotation in Hearthstone, to be fair.
Yeah. But I think with the difference with Hearthstone, it's like we mentioned before, the crafting system really helped. It really did help, right? You get, I think, sure, if you're still spending whatever it was, like €80, €100 on like all the packs or whatever, every 3 or 4 months. Even if you do that, and then you probably disenchant most of your old stuff, you'd pretty much be set. And I particularly remember I'd always loved the expansion that would come out around like April, the one that would be at the start of a new rotation, because you'd have 3 previous sets that have just rotated out that you get like giga value to just like disenchant everything pretty much. So yeah,
we never got a button where you can just disenchant everything. So
I cannot believe that's still not a thing. I don't believe, right? Maybe it is now.
That I'm not sure. I haven't played in a bit, but that was outrageous.
Yeah, for sure. So the next comment is somebody that is pretty much against rotation, I do believe. They say, Percy, I want whatever format that keeps 99% of cards legal in competitive. So I vote for Power Creep. If you want to make the new cards a bit stronger, so be it. Don't force us to stop playing the oldies. Let it be our decision. Do you think that we can see both, Moyne? Which I think is what Hearthstone has tended to do, which is they do rotation, but they definitely do power creep in that game as well.
Yeah, no, I mean, to an extent, I think power creep, even when you do rotation, you still need all the new sets and new cards to be maybe slightly better than the old ones to make you excited about them, want to play with them. I understand the sentiment behind this, and I'm very happy we got to see like such wide spread of opinion in the comments. But yeah, I personally still see a bunch of issues like rising when we do go down this route where it's just power creep, because then when you never rotate and you keep power creeping, at what point does the game like turn into Yu-Gi-Oh and you win turn 1 or turn 2?
Yeah. There's like three turns max and the game's just over, right? Yeah. So next comment is from David B. They say, let the goobers play 61 plus cards and stay free. And there was a few comments where people were just like, just let them be. They're like, they're literally doing a disadvantage to themselves. It's fine. Like, don't even mention it. And I think most people, I've seen a lot of tags to us on Twitter as well, you know, at Podcana. Have you seen this absolutely crazy 61 card list and stuff? And it's definitely becoming a bit of a meme at the moment. And people are like, oh, you know, move on from it and stuff like that. But I'm gonna feed the meme personally. I like to feed the meme. But yeah, no, I mean, if people bring it up and they want to talk about it, I think it's fine to talk about it. I think we mentioned last week, yeah, it has been a little bit exhausting to continuously talk about. I think we're starting to become, you know, known as the people that are like really against it. But I don't think it's just us. Maybe it is just us and we're crazy, but I really don't believe that.
Someone on our Discord also commented with like a spreadsheet where where they compiled how many players in DLC top cuts actually played 60 cards, 61, 62, 63 to 69, or even 70 or more cards. And on average, it seems like around about 15% of players in top cut actually play more than 60 cards. Most of them actually being on exactly 61. And then the comment they said, which probably was a bit of a joke in itself, was, 15% of DLC top cut players can't be wrong. I think they can definitely be wrong. I think much higher percentage of that could be wrong. I think looking at the spreadsheet is very interesting. I would love to have the data on what percentage of the entire field is on more than 60 cards. Is it higher than 15%?
That would be interesting.
Like around the same? Is it less? That I would love to see. But yeah, 15% of top card players, they can be so wrong. It's not impossible.
Yep. And then the last comment we had was actually from our Discord. The name is cut off here, unfortunately, but they say, hey, love the podcast. What are your thoughts on the fact that in Canada, there's a big box store called, oh my God, they're actually calling them out. Indigo started selling Azure IC products like blisters, throws, and gift sets early this week, even before LGS. So, I mean, I know there's a lot of places that will get their product early, mainly being the LGSs, and that a lot of stores, I think particularly in America, I'm not sure about Europe, I'm sure there are still plenty in Europe, but a lot in America for sure will open product and, you know, get singles ready for people to just get the cards. And I think that's a good thing. I think it's, you know, it's more product availability for when people want to get them. But I don't know how avoidable this is in terms of people just getting product early or people opening product early. Ultimately, sure, yeah, it's not fair that people get to play with their cards before you, but then equally, all the cards are available. So if you really want to play with your cards right now, they're actually not getting... The only advantage they're getting over you is like they will have their proper cards. They will probably be able to organize their proper cards before you. And then that's it. Like, you'll still be able to do as much testing as them. So while I agree, it's not a good thing. It's probably quite difficult to prevent. Although maybe calling them out, if it's like super early, maybe Ravensburger will give them a little bit of a talking to, for sure. What are your thoughts, Moyne? I mean, as a player, I'm like, I don't know how much I care. Like, ultimately, like, sure, okay, it was someone else getting product before me. Oh, it's a bit of a bummer. But yeah, there's literally nothing we can do to stop it. I
Yeah,
mean, you know what I mean?
yeah, I'm also like, I guess it's not fair, but I really couldn't care less that some people get to play with them a bit earlier. Mm. And if I'd rather have everyone start on the same day, but it's not the end of the world.
Yep. Okay, and with that, yeah, that was the Spilled Ink section. If you guys want to have your questions read out on next week's episode of the podcast, be sure to pop a comment down below, or also join the Discord server. There's been some great, like, not even just great conversations, but like you said, Moin, like that spreadsheet and stuff. These really, really interesting things to be popping up in the Discord. So, yeah, be sure to hop in if you haven't joined already. Link in the description. But yeah, moving into the main topic, myself and Moin are going to be discussing. I've kind of titled this as like, day one set 6 decks, but we're not really going to be going through full ones. We're more so going to be talking about certain cards that we think are going to be included, why we think they might be in there, why we think certain cards might not fit. Moyen has a lot of notes down in front of him here, so I think we'll have a good discussion for sure.
Yeah, to me, I would also just much rather than focus on exact 60 card deck lists before the set's even out. I want to talk about like what cards could shape the meta in what way, what dynamics are there between new cards, what do we think about how some of the early meta will look like, not necessarily the 60 card deck list.
Yep, sure. All right, to start us off, we're going to start off with Sapphire Steel, which previously it's been like, the wheel or no wheel version, as far as I'm aware from all of these previous sets. So in terms of new cards that we got for this deck, what I have noted down here myself is Oswald. I say, is Oswald worth testing within a deck like Sapphire Steel? Does it rely too much on, you need to have this heavy item presence with items such as Maurice Workshop, the Great Stone Dragon, perhaps Moyen's favorite card, to actually make it worthwhile and to kind of make it fit into the deck? And ultimately, at that stage, are you going to be building a different version of Sapphire Steel? I wouldn't say a completely different version, but I think you're just more so really heavily going in on the game plan of, Tamatoa is definitely your win condition, Ariel is definitely your win condition, but you're putting in a lot more item cards and maybe taking out some character cards, some cards to help you remove your opponent's threats. But have you considered Oswald in a Sapphire Steel deck at this stage?
Yeah, I've actually already tested a lot of Oswald decks.
Ooh, okay.
And especially in Sapphire Steel, it seems to make more sense because you can play the 8 1-drop items. But okay, when you hit any item of it, it's kind of fine. When you hit like a Fortisphere or Popsicle, but it's nothing groundbreaking. Let's say you ink 2 cards, hit one drop item. It's like, I guess it's slightly better than Cheater just drawing you a card without putting an item in play. The problem is you can also whiff, and it's then kind of just played this uninkable 2-1 that didn't even draw your card when you double ink. So what's the upside is you can develop an early time, which you still probably won't use for a while, but which means as soon as you kind of stabilize the board, you can push very far ahead because you already have this time in play. Maybe you can hit a Quill. Usually the versions then also start playing workshops because you need like this critical mass of items, which is almost like you want to almost play like near 20 items, but also depends on what items you're putting in. Are they good enough? I've tested, I don't even know what the bow is called. I tested a bow that gives plus challenger and evasive to heroes.
You tested a bow?
A bow.
Oh, a bow. Okay.
Yeah. That was on the edge of a card that's so bad. Even for Oswald, I don't want to just put that card in my deck. The big issue with the Oswald is kind of all of the items, even when you do hit them, they kind of struggle to give you board presence. So maybe while setting up these items, you fall behind on board, and then can you really recover the board in a meaningful way after that? Which is why the other item I've tested a lot is the Steel Quomicon, which is 6 cost uninkable item, tap to deal 1 damage on a character, and that's not a very good card. So then sometimes the deck actually works pretty well, but then other times now your deck's full of like bows, Steel Quomicons, workshops, a lot of these, and then your deck can become very clunky in the games where either you don't draw Oswald or where Oswald doesn't hit.
Oswald's also quite easily removable as well, right? For the most part. Yeah.
I mean, it's a little bit like Cheater, so but the payoff doesn't really feel better than Cheater. It kind of feels worse in a weird way. How you can kind of help Oswald hit more often with a card that's okay. It's like it's not great, it's not awful. Is with the Aurora, which is 4-cost 3/3 inkable quest for 2. It gives you items ward and you can tap it. So you can the ability is you can tap an item. This is you don't have to. Even the turn you play, or you can do this as often as you want. Tap an item to look at the top card of your deck, and either you keep it top or you put it at the bottom. So especially when you get a couple of items in play, Aurora can often make sure you have an item on top when you do ink with an Oswald on the board. She's not just good for Oswald, which is why she's just like overall an okay card. She might just help you get closer to the Flaversham that you really need by putting the non-Flaversham cards to the bottom of your deck. And yeah, so there was lots of things going for it. With all the items in play, I've also tried the Sheriff of Nottingham. And then if you play the Sheriff of Nottingham, actually a bunch of your characters have 4 or more strength. So if you play Argis as the 2-drop, maybe another draw engine that you could play is Raid Set.
Oh my god.
It's a little bit like a workshop, but inkable. It's just if you play a 4-strength character, tap an ink to draw
So
one.
are you playing like Chen Pos in that deck as well and everything? Like maybe like
no, I wasn't. I think I was just playing like. I mean, it's just to occasionally get some card drop. I still had like Argis that has 4 strength, Tinkerbell. I was trying Gantu, but I'm a little bit more down on the card than I've been, but it has very good stats. It has 4 strength, and then the Sheriff of Nottingham, Tamatoas. I think just off that, there's usually enough cards, but yeah, overall, I don't want to say it fell flat. It still did okay. I don't know if it's the optimal way going forward for the deck right now until maybe we get some items, some better or some more items that we want to play anyways, or some items that specifically impact the board a little bit more than the items we have right now.
Yeah, that's definitely interesting.
What that deck definitely does is because I was playing like 4 dime, some sheriffs, and play out all these items with Oswald, and you have all the card draw with workshops or maybe even raid sets. What that deck does do is if you do not pressure that deck quick enough, they will tap 2 dimes on a Tamatoa for plus 20 in a turn. I mean, by quickly, I mean it's still maybe turn like 7, 8, 9, but
yeah. The difference is that deck is probably tough to play against versus like the quicker decks, and we have a note down here to say that the quicker decks definitely got quicker. So
yes,
it's
that's definitely an issue that we'll get to in a bit.
Yeah, still talking about Sapphire Steel as a whole. There's one card we didn't include in our notes. I do want to bring it up because I think I saw it within our Discord. I'm curious on your thoughts. Maybe it's completely like way too slow because the consistency of you doing this isn't really that good. But someone was talking about there's the 1-cost Nick Wild, which is a 1/2, and I think it's when you have a character in play with support, then it becomes a 3/2. So they were like, oh, does this work with Chicha in some sense? Do you ever see it being played? What are your thoughts on that one?
Well, it's interesting. I hadn't thought about that. It's initially the problem with having a 1-drop having synergy with Chicha is that Chicha is much better in a no-wheel version. Because the no-wheel version really needs the card draw, whereas in the wheel version you can just play like a 2-drop that provides more tempo, then you go Quill, play a big guy, play Holy Word, and then it didn't matter if the 2-drop was Chicha that drew your card. It's okay. We already know Chicha is much better in no wheel. The problem is in no wheel you cannot afford to play this 1-drop where all it does is be a 3/2. The card needs to have more value per card to really be playable. So I don't want to play Nick Wild in the no wheel version, but I don't really want to play wheel in the. I don't really want to play Chicha in the wheel version. So then maybe I don't get to see the synergy between them. But the synergy definitely exists between them.
It exists, but then another problem is, Chicha's your only support card.
Yeah.
And there's only 4. You know what I mean? Like, yeah.
You exert the Chicha and you exert the. Okay, maybe you don't exert it. Let's say you just exert the Nick Wild. You're like, oh, it's a 3/2. I'm chilling, and then somehow the opponent deals 1 damage to your Chicha and
then you're sad.
baits the Nick Wild, and then you're very sad. I'm just looking. Is there any more support, like good support characters?
Moin's getting excited now. He's like, oh, the Nick Wild potential. Yeah.
Fido was very good when it came out, but that was set one.
Oh yeah. Phil was in like the back in the day, like the Sapphire Amber deck, wasn't he? I'm pretty sure he was.
Yeah, no, he was a good card in that deck.
Yeah. But yeah, okay. So speaking about some of the other inclusions, so well, I know you took notes on some specific cards, but Calhoun within a Sapphire Steel deck. What are your thoughts on that? Because we already have Mr. Smee. Is it
Yeah.
just like basically another Smee, but it's an uninkable Smee? It's harder to remove, that type of thing.
Yes, Calhoun is super interesting to me. It has the greatest stats of a 2-drop you could ever want in a card. I think maybe in some aggressive steel decks, I would probably play a few copies of her at least. In Sapphire Steel, it's so weird because you kind of ask yourself, okay, you have this great stat, a 2-drop, but what does it really accomplish? In what matchups is this the 2-drop you want to be drawing? So maybe against like a very aggressive, let's say against like green purple, against like an aggressive deck, probably it's fine. But then at the end of the day, maybe Smee would be similarly good, maybe surely worse than Calhoun, but maybe by not as much. And is the difference you're paying, does it make up for Calhoun being uninkable? Because in a lot of other matchups, let's say against Emerald Steel, I would much rather have a Magic Boom that contests the evasive. Or against Red Blue or Red Purple, I would love to have Chicha or a card even like Oswald that it stops Flynn, but also it can only really be removed by Brawl. It provides some card advantage if it doesn't get removed against these decks. So that upside of an uninkable 2-drop in these matchups, to me, is much higher than the upside of Calhoun in the like aggressive matchups. But if the meta is very aggressive, maybe it makes sense. To me right now, at first I thought, okay, Calhoun's in the deck, Sade is in the deck is even better now. But I don't think it's as easy as that. I think Calhoun might not even make the deck. Sale might make the deck, but how much does it really improve the deck?
Yeah,
very
and
complicated.
one of your last notes here I can see is you discuss Zeus saying that it's better versus Genie and Maui, but is it good enough to make its way into the deck?
Yeah, because Zeus has always been this card that sometimes the meta like makes you play it, where maybe you need some extra damage against locations. It was a big reason why we previously played it, or maybe it just lines up as we move very well. But it's never really fit this deck as like it fits Ember Steel greatly, but in this deck, it's like this uninkable song. You already need to be playing a bunch of uninkables that are like more important to what the deck wants to do than Zeus is. It's an extra song when, especially in the no-wheel version, the only song you really play is Grab Your Sword. So it's an extra song that you could draw that would just be discarded by Ursula. And it's on its own, it doesn't carry much value as just a one card, right? The most it does is usually 1-for-1, but maybe it can provide some tempo. The problem is, in this deck, most of the time, the opportunity cost of singing Zeus is actually kind of big. Because Flower Charm often has items to cycle. All the other cards except Flower Charm that cost 4 or more usually quest for 2 or more and have some very much needed utility. So in the end, right now I think day one I would go into it probably playing 1 Zeus, which means if any red deck wants to get one on you and risk to play a Maui, maybe you can punish him by singing a Zeus and win a lot of tempo on that. But I don't think you suddenly want to go too high on it. The Genie is the big card, I think, why quick purple decks have gotten even quicker. They've also gotten some extra reach, but I think the Genie is really, really efficient, really annoying to deal with its evasive 2-4 stat line. And causes a lot of issues. But even against the Genie, I'm not sure Zeus is the way you want to answer it. I think maybe the way you want to answer it is just play more 2-damage instances and just say, okay, I play something like Simba plus a Fire the Cannons, or Grab Your Swords plus a Fire the Cannons. And just that might be a more efficient way of building your deck to also be able to deal with the Genie without including cards that might not really fit your deck.
So yeah, then we're gonna move on to red, purple, or ruby, amethyst, and some things we've noted down here are particular inclusions or just like more tech options against the Diablo, right? So are we gonna see the comeback of Teeth and Ambitions? I mean, the Ruby Amethyst deck. I mean, we're looking at one in particular right now, which is definitely built in a different way. But do you think that Ruby Amethyst decks will start to move away from the Sisu Flynn line and go back to using these, like, just using crabs and maybe even including the White Rose, which is kind of like a cheaper Merlin goat now, and just go to focus more on tempo rather than going for the kind of the Flynn Sisu plan? Or what are your thoughts on it?
The Flynn Sisu scam.
The scam, maybe... the thing that lost me my first round in Birmingham. I was so mad about it. Yeah, when they go Flynn, Sisu, GG.
Yeah. So I guess this is like a little bit more honest. The Diablo into a Cusco, maybe a Crab or White Rose. It's less scammy, more consistent, lets them have more cards in it, but especially doesn't have them this like on the play great opening line that's very tough to beat for a lot of decks. It's tough to say. I think in general, Red Purple is almost like the most interesting deck to build right now, just because it has, like, if you try to build Red Purple, there's like a billion cards that are basically almost good enough, and you could be including. There's also so many decisions. It's now you have for 1-drops, you have Followers, Diablo, and the Broom.
Yeah.
Which ones of these are you playing? What's the split between of these? For the 2-drop, are you playing Cusco, Flynn? Do you split between these? For the 3-drop, and then do you want to play the Flynn Sisu line or not? How many Crabs, White Roses do you play? I think the 4-drop is very interesting because now I think the Genie is okay. It's not straight up better, right? It draws a card list. It's worse to bounce it, but I find it
interesting, because I feel like a lot of people, I don't know, I feel like maybe it was split different ways, that some people were looking at the Genie and saying, this seems like really, really good, and some people, maybe just Red Purple players, are like, no, the Rabbit's just like strictly better, which if you're talking about like a pure, you want pure card attrition, card advantage, the Rabbit can pop off a little bit more, but then sure, you could be going through getting more cards and stuff, but then also if you want to include all of these, if we're now including the Teeths and, we're putting in the Cuscos and the White Roses and the Crabs and stuff, like, we need like you said, there's a billion options to choose from, and we still want to keep it as consistent as possible, so you want to make sure you're including the right cards in there. I do think that the Elsa might be able to help out against the Genie, but the Elsa alone isn't going to be enough, right? The Elsa alone can just hit in for 2, so like, do you think because honestly, if the Genie's going to become such a big problem, especially if you're just talking about like a red-purple mirror match, you've got Brawl, and then in any other color, it's like, right, you've got Zeus, and that's it, right? Brawl and Zeus are kind of the answers to the Genie, and that's it right now.
Yeah, so, I think when the card came out, most people were like, it's a good card. I think we said it's a good card, but still we said, I don't know.
I think we did say Rabbit was better overall. I think we did.
I think we said it's a great card, but it's an uninkable 4-drop. Do we really want to play this in the same deck as Rabbit? I think the answer is absolutely yes. Now that people got to play games, I think people are really getting onto this. It's if you ever play a game where you play a Rabbit and your opponent plays a Genie, and then like, okay, yes, but if my Rabbit gets bounced or if it gets banished, I have an extra card. Your opponent doesn't care. He's questing for 2 every turn from now on until you deal with it.
And still getting a card, yeah.
And then the interplay between the Genies is also fun because, yes, Elsa helps dealing with Genies, but you kind of need to play a Genie yourself so that you can deal with it. Also, now, let's say I play Genie, you play Genie. Now, do you quest with your Genie?
Because you expect the Elsa?
Right, no, I mean, if it's the Elsa you expect, you could as well quest, right? Because Elsa could tap it.
Yeah.
But now also, by questing, what if your opponent has a Crab? It's not quite the same, right? It comes down turn 4, it draws a card, it's unequal. But like, it reminds me a little bit of the Minnie Mouse meta game, where it was like, you just want to spam minis in the red-purple mirror.
Yeah, right.
And then it's always the risk if you But if you quest with a mini while your opponent has a mini, they could have a CURV. It's a little bit like that. I think a card that's also very interesting is the Peter Pan Shadow Finder.
Mm-hmm.
Is it Shadow Finder or Shadow? I always
Shadow Finder. Shadow Finder,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah,
that's interesting, actually, because I did want to bring that up as another potential. I mean, I know people have run it in the past to try and, tech against the Diablo option, but now you might want to play this card not only against the Diablo, but yeah, if you're starting to see genies a little bit more and just stuff like that, it suddenly becomes quite interesting. And the Shadow Finder is the one also, right? It makes your other rush cards evasive, right?
No,
so suddenly
it's the other one. It makes your evasive rush.
Oh, it makes your evasive cards rush. Okay.
Which does multiple things. One, let's say you're playing against like an aggressive deck. Shadow Finder trades something. Next turn you play Genie. Genie can already trade something. But also it enables you. Okay, the other card I think that's very important to talk about. That's kind of meta warping, but people are still not sure really where to find the best home for the card. It's Maui Half Shark, the 6-drop evasive. It's like when you play an action, gain a lore, but also if he challenges the character, get an action back from your discard. But the biggest problem with that card is the turn you play him doesn't really do all that much. If you get to stick a Shadow Finder on the board into the shark, and now you're threatening a half shark that immediately has rush and challenges something, gets an action back. Now that can maybe bridge the turn where it would usually lose you tempo into another turn where you're gaining tempo and now you're pushing on top of it. And then now we've talked about this Genie a lot, but I think in general there's so many interesting decisions now. It's like how many Medusas, Tremaines do you play? B-Kings. There's a billion ways you like. How many locations?
How many locations? What's the location split?
Do you still play a few Finders Keepers to like tech against Emerald Steel? Very interesting. And so that one deck list that like we have had here as a talking point was saying, okay, now that we have this Diablo 1-drop that we don't really mind if it gets banished. Does it enable cards like Thief and Ambitions and Glimmer versus Glimmer again? I'm not sure it enables Glimmer versus Glimmer, as it's an uninkable 4-drop action.
No.
And then at the end of the day, it's still kind of a Dragonfire.
It's like
when you have
it's like is Glimmer versus Glimmer is like, sure, you get to pick the target, but is B-King just better? Especially if you want to talk about like the early stages, like Glimmer versus Glimmer, maybe it's better the later the game goes on, because then you can choose if they've got a water board. But if they've got a water board, wouldn't you just want to kind of be prep, unless it's like unless it's kind of a mid board that you don't want to be prep? So I think it's just probably B-King if you want to do the Glimmer versus Glimmer thing. But
that being said, I think that the Thief is a fair shout. I've probably, when I played lots of Red Purple, I've been like the biggest Thief and Ambitions hater you can imagine. But with the Diablo, and as it's also one of the few ways you can remove an early Diablo and tech for that, I'm at least entertaining
until it goes to a cove. Am I right, Moyen? This is everyone's topic of conversation. I just want to interrupt a little bit. I've been seeing all over Twitter, like, I know the card's been around for a while. People haven't liked the card and stuff, but like, there's been this absolute eruption of Diablo hate, which I think it's probably just always been there. It's in the background, just bubbling or whatever. People are just like, you move Diablo to the cove, it's like, what can you do? It's just GG's. And it's like, but they're not going to get it every time. And if your opponent gets it 2 times against you, like they got lucky, they got it, and there's nothing you can do. You can't tech your deck to be like, oh, I'm gonna stop this exact thing from happening or prepare for this, or you know what I mean? It's like, it is what it, like. I'm interested to think. I don't think it will come down to this, but do you think people will be like so scared? And I think this is bad overall, right? It's like, okay, if they have the Diablo shift cove thing and they just play the 1-drop Diablo, and let's say you have like the fire, the cannons, or the boom or whatever, do people just, because I've seen some players do this against me when I played Green Steel, was like, oh, they'll just remove the 1-drop Diablo, which sure prevents the shift, and it's like it does stop the tempo. But then if they don't have the extra removal and then they just play the 3-drop Diablo, sure, it's slower. Like, it's that balance of valuing. Do you want to get rid of the actual key disrupting card, or do you want to stop the absolute insane nuts start? You know.
Yeah, as Sapphire Steel, funny that you mentioned this, it's actually a play you go for a lot where you remove the 1-drop Diablo, because if you get the Flower down before their 3-drop Diablo is exerted, let's say they play 3-drop Diablo, you play Flower and then it's exerted, you're like, okay, that's fine. I already got some card advantage here. But one, it plays around the thing where they put it in the cove and you kind of just lose the game. But two, it also on turn 3 it's really not that scary. The scary part is maybe now they play a Morph on 2 and it's again pressuring.
And then they go Diablo.
Yeah, they could go Shift Diablo, Diablo, or Shift Diablo, Sad Beast, or just or just
Shift
not,
Sad Beast.
Not Shift Diablo Sad Beast, but just Sad Beast. Which also really means against Emerald Steel, I think like you can't have enough fire cannons. If you want your deck to be just good against it, you as Sapphire Steel just play as many as you can and shoot everything on sight. But yeah, it's very, very difficult. I guess yes, they won't get it all the time. In Seattle I did beat like a turn 3 2 Diablos in a cove where I drew them like a million cards and I was still super close, right? Usually you don't win them. And I guess that's the common complaint. It's when that happens, they just feel out of control starting like turn 2 of the game and feel like there's nothing they can really do. And I think that's a valid complaint.
Yeah. I find that interesting about, like, yeah, you're of the opinion that you just play as many fire the cannons as possible. And especially maybe even moving into this, you know, like we're saying, if the faster decks are getting faster, you know, usually it's okay, if your hand's like a little bit clunky and you have like, you know, a lot of these fire the cannons, well, they're only going to cost you 1. And if decks are faster, they should be playing more threatening cards earlier for you to then have reasons to play as many of these fire the cannons in your deck as possible, right? So I guess it just gets worse if it's like, you know, you draw the fire the cannons later when you needed to draw like a big, powerful, impactful card. Like that maybe doesn't feel as good, but no, I kind of agree with that. I think that you want to be playing a lot of them to respond to this faster.
Yeah, so in the same vein, maybe Diablo Thief can somewhat supplement that, even if it doesn't beat like Diablo Cove.
Yeah. All right, so we're going to stick to purple, but we're going to move on to green purple, or emerald amethyst as it's known. And yeah, just I guess general thoughts on this deck. The only thoughts I have on it is still when I absolutely destroyed you a few days ago. But I'm gonna digress, because that deck was not very, very good in terms of, you know, I tried to include some cards in it, but it had some interesting things going for it. Genie still very much. Do you think Genie's just in like every purple deck right now? You think it's like just super, super solid?
Yeah, there's no deck that wouldn't want it. Even if you have like a purple deck that like wants to play more for late game, let's say like a blue purple deck, it's still you wouldn't mind already having a threat down turn 4. I think every purple deck will just play Genie.
Yeah. I think that's fair.
Yeah. So green purple profits off it, not just off having like it improves a bit its steel matchups, because suddenly it has an efficient threat that's also not super easy to deal for steel. So I think its emerald steel matchups got a bit closer, and against slower decks, okay, it has aggressive curves, has aggressive if you choose to play them, has aggressive 2-questers and like Banzai, Merfolk, Genie. But also you have so much reach late game. You have all the golds and bounces, maybe a few white roses, and go Tamagos.
Oh yeah.
Which I think they end up in your ink a lot. Sometimes you play them on 2 if you don't have anything to do. But just the threat of them does
they come out of nowhere, right? And it's like if you've got something that has 3 damage on it, and like you pass the turn over, you're like, man, if they have it, you know. So maybe you force your opponent to like make bad trades and stuff like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Maybe they have to banish a popsicle so that the character has 2 damage less, so you could gain only 2 draw less. Or maybe they have they clear your board, but it leaves up a damaged Maui, and now now the only way you can win is if you find a Gogo Tamago on the Maui. Will they try to remove their own Maui?
I think I'm very happy that they balanced that card personally, in terms of it saying damaged opposing character, Because if it was your characters, you could be pretty smart about how you handle things for sure.
Sure. Yeah, you could also just play it like Emerald Ruby
Emerald
and play
Ruby's the
the
self-damaging stuff.
self-damage character
Yeah.
Gogo Tamago.
Although I don't know anything that
It's
self-damages for 5 and still survives or something like that, you know?
yeah.
But still.
But what's the biggest you can self-damage in
I think
Ruby?
it's Beast, honestly. It's the 3-cost Beast, which isn't even that much. I think it's still 2.
Oh, and does play with 4 damage. Yup.
Oh, just wait, 4 damage?
It's a 3-cost 2/6 that enters with 4 damage.
Oh,
That's
it
a
is. Okay,
3-cost
it's bigger than I thought. Yeah. Yeah, that
Yeah,
would be kind of the
that
same.
would be quite dangerous.
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, so we're gonna move on then to Emerald Steel. We're saying it didn't get too much, but it still crushes purple decks, and you have here that you might want to up the muses count to deal with the genie. That's quite interesting. Yeah, that's another way to delay the genie, because the genie has to come down on the quest to be getting its value. So
Yeah, that's so basically the purple decks got better, but how much did they actually get better against Emerald Steel? Yes, the genie is an evasive card. That also makes Shadowfinder a bit better, so you can maybe afford to play Shadowfinder a little bit more. So the purple decks got slightly better against Emerald Steel, but at the end of the day, or also especially in green purple, right? They have in Diablo, and usually if you kit it, they just replay it, and now you're in the same problem again. But now if you play kit, they replay it, you play genie. The Diablo wasn't exerted when you played genie, because they had to replay it, and now that you have something on the board that they need to deal with, I think that actually kind of
that they won't be able to deal with that, especially at that stage of the game, easily at all.
They might not be able to deal with it, or at least not easily, or maybe not at all.
What they'd have to do in that situation is probably like play Ursula, the 3-cost Ursula Singer, not exert their Diablo, and then you just go Elsa turn 5, bam!
Exactly.
You get them.
Yes, you definitely have some tools now. So that's what I thought at first, especially when I tested against like set 5 lists of Emerald Steel. But then I realized, okay, what if Emerald Steel players, they just adapt, and now they see if all these purple decks now all play genie, why don't I just up my muses count, and suddenly I don't struggle to deal with genie at all. They play genie, I play muses, and I bounce it on my own terms whenever I'm happy to play a song. So at the end of the day, I think even if Emerald Steel doesn't necessarily want to play too many new cards, even when you play 0 cards of set 6, I think Emerald Steel still beats the aggressive decks, the purple decks. And probably still only gets gate capped by like Amber Steel, Ruby Sapphire, Sapphire Steel. That's my assumption for now.
Sure. And then you talked about the this was the Mewi Shark, right? You have a note here saying that it improves the Ruby Sapphire deck more than it does the Ruby Amethyst deck.
Yeah. And that, I think people at first looked at it in red purple, but in red purple, it's usually not about having this like one big thing. It's more every card you play is ink efficient, and your advantage starts adding up. And paying six ink for a character that doesn't do anything on the play can have a huge negative tempo if your opponent can deal with it well. Also, even if it does, like, you don't play that many actions the turn after to really gain too much value of it. And 6 ink is really a lot to pay for a character that doesn't do anything on the play, unless you have something like a Shadowfinder on the board. But in red blue, I think it helps red blue just be more proactive, where they sometimes when they didn't have like their Dime Tomato of Lava Charm shenanigans, sometimes they struggle to do something when you didn't have a board. If you have a board, they can Medusa you, they can Maleficent you, but if you don't have a board, they kind of struggle to do things. Now they can get proactive a lot quicker. Maybe go people into Sing One Jump and then just play the Maui, or like ramp onto play Fargo, play the Maui half shark if you don't pressure them enough to have to use a Medusa. And they can, especially later in the game when they have more ink, if a half shark sticks, they can punish you with a lot of lore gain. When they play like Vision or Fargo, maybe one jumps, balls, but also I think they might up the count of develop your brains, as that works very well with the half shark. They could also just cycle a sail. So especially like let's say in a game your opponent's already on like 10, 12 ink, and you let a half shark stick, that can threaten a lot of lore gain. And also after a B prep, or even let's say Emerald Steel discards your B prep and you just play this half shark. Now, as soon as they exert something that half shark can challenge, now you're threatening the B prep of your discard. So I think in red, like in both decks, it's nothing too crazy, but I think red blue is kind of a better home for it than red purple.
Do you think that could be another thing, another factor of, like you mentioned with red purple, that there's just nearly too many options and too many, which is probably it's a good thing, right? Decks can be. I think it's a really good thing, because we're finally gonna get to the stage where there are really gonna be like multiple Ruby Amethyst builds, like, and probably very good Ruby Amethyst builds. One that we've already seen, which I know if we talk about it, it might hurt a little bit more in it, but like people have been adapting to try and play like, you know, Ruby Amethyst burn decks as well that go quite a bit faster, which makes me reminisce on the days where I could play Ruby Amethyst aggro, which was funny.
Yeah, that's the funniest thing. I think initially maybe you'd think half shark just fits the burn deck because it can gain lore of actions. You want to play actions to gain lore anyways, but I'm not quite sure it does. I think that burn deck kind of just wants to play locations, make you have to challenge them, then play B preps, and then play like cards that actually gain you lore when you play them, and not a 6-drop that can maybe gain you lore
right?
later down the line. So it's interesting that I think maybe that's not like the burn version of red purple is not really the home for the half shark.
And the last note that we have here is we say that Amber Steel got very little except the Lilo to sustain some pressure. Yeah, I do agree. I don't think it got too many tools. But like, again, that being said, we said this already. I think this is basically from like set 4 onwards. Oh, like Amber Steel gets like 1 card every set. Like set 4, it got the 1/4 Ursula, and then it slowly gets, but it's still a good deck. You know, it's still good.
Set 4 we got Ursula. Set 5 we got Daisy Duck
and Pete.
And now right, and Pete. And now we got the Lilo, which means if you run out of cards, maybe you can sustain the pressure a little bit better. You can play the bodyguard. Is it a Goofy? That might be alright. It's not a Goofy.
Is it bodyguard? I'll look it up.
It's like a 4-cost 1/5 if it's not damage +4 strength.
Oh yeah. I've actually seen this card, and I thought after kind of looking at it again, I was like, oh, you know what? It's actually, is it in amber or is it in
No, it's in steel.
It's in steel, right? Yeah, that's what I thought.
So regardless of its name, it's it might very well end up in Amber Steel and just make it so that
Pluto.
Yeah, it's a Pluto. See, Pluto's is goofy.
Yeah.
So basically, now you have this early aggressive curve, and if your opponent relies on challenging to banish your early aggressive questers, the Pluto can put a stop to that.
This was the Tar Creeper card we were trying to call it. Like, the Tar Creeper. Yes, it's a good card. It's 4-cost 5/5 if it's not damaged. As soon as it is damaged, they still have to make their way through it. You know what I mean? So it's
it's also right. That's also Lawrence. As soon as you damage it, you can like challenge it, and your characters don't even take any damage. Pluto, even after you do the initial bump, at least your characters still take some damage of it.
And they're still protected. Your other characters are still protected. Like, they have to work their way through this card in particular. So that's quite interesting. Yeah, so that's the main notes that we have on all the decks. Some stuff I do want to mention is I would actually like to get people's opinions, and I'd love to see some, you know, discussions in their Discord and stuff, and make sure we see these. I'd love to see some of the ink color combinations that, you know, ones maybe we haven't talked on the podcast too much, because I think ultimately we're going to be looking at the main meta decks, the stuff that have done well previously, see what cards can be added to, you know, adapt them and make them better. But for any people out there that are, you know, big Blurple players or big Emerald Sapphire players, like, share your thoughts with us. Let us know what cards, like, because I think those are the most interesting to me, because I'm like, okay, to convince me that those colors are like really really viable now, because they, like, you know, I think they were like slowly getting there, but to say that they're like really really good now, I want to see, okay, like these are the cards that came into the deck with set 6, hence with this, it really brings the deck together, because that's the stuff that I want to see from it. And I haven't really seen too much of it so far, but I definitely think there's some potential within Blurple. If I just look at the new cards that came with set 6, I can see Blurple maybe getting somewhere. But I mean, I'll ask you, Moin, because you said this is the time where you get to experiment with crazy stuff. Have you messed around with any of these combinations, or are you just trying to leave like, are you the type of person that you want to leave it until maybe you see something first and then you want to dive into it more? Like, you want to see the potential first?
Maybe usually I do that, but I think right now I care too much about Continentals to do that. So I am exploring all those things too. I think like Blurple is the deck that, for example, uses Sail at its best, because it can really use the 1 ink well to
Play a good
play
one
another
drop.
1-drop.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, the Genie is also great for that deck, but I still see it struggling against Emerald Steel quite a bit. But yeah,
from what I saw against Emerald Steel with Blurple, was yeah, like, you can beat it, but you need like the perfect answer, and if you don't get that, and that perfect answer consists of like, you need your ramp on 2, you need to play like a decent 4-cost card, be that like, you know, Scrooge McDuck or whatever. It doesn't have to be Scrooge, but like, you need to have the Elsa as fast as possible against the Emerald Steel player, and if you don't, it goes
another Elsa the turn after.
It's definitely a lot. So you need like your Tipo into X card into Elsa, or your 1-drop into X card into Elsa. And if that's all you can really do right now, maybe it's not enough. I mean, I guess maybe if you add in the Shadow Finder, it's something for the moment. But it's still like, these are all still cards that are like, how much does it actually help? At least, like we're saying, for Ruby Amethyst, it has some of these other options like Teeth and Ambitions. You can do it on your Cusco, so you still get to draw a card and stuff like that. So yeah, it's interesting, because that's some more points I saw on Twitter where people were like, oh, if Diablo didn't exist, there'd be so much more room for so many other decks, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, yeah, but the card does exist, so we have to try and put cards in the deck,
also,
you know?
Usually, I mean, if anything didn't exist, it's very hard to predict that matter. There might be some other deck that was kept in check by Diablo that now keeps dominating everything. In general, I also do agree. I don't think Diablo is like the healthiest card for the game, but I don't know if it necessarily warrants a ban, but that's not up to us.
I heard some people saying that they were quite like, I don't know, they were like, oh, when Diablo came out and the Bookie deck existed, that Bookie was the card. Diablo was also like just as much as a problem. People were like, they should have banned both of them together and stuff. I'm like, I think it would have been really bad in my opinion, because I think when that Bookie deck became a thing, that was the set Diablo came out, right? Diablo was set 4. I'm like, if they ban a card that literally just came out, where they don't have like all of the testing time to show. I mean, they had like a meta of a set, but I think you need to let a meta play out a bit longer than that before you go banning cards, unless there's like an egregious, this card is, you know, you can see in all the win percentage. I mean, we know it's a strong card, right? But it would have to go through the roof to ban it that early, or to have an action against that early. Maybe that's just my opinion, but I think for the most part, designers would rather like see how stuff plays out. I have no doubt that they firmly have their eye on Diablo for sure right now. Like I can bet you that for sure.
Yeah. For me, I guess just on an emotional level, I understand where people are coming from, just because I've tested so many things, and so often I know the set's not out yet, but I've still been testing with proxies and stuff, and it's like a lot of ideas I just had to scrap, because I was like, no, I don't see a chance that this deck would ever be favored against a Diablo Emerald Steel deck.
It's like we talked about with the Blurple thing, right? It's like that. It's like you have to have all of these answers, and it's like you're inherently taking playing. You have such a huge risk, because Diablo's a strong card. People will play strong cards, so your deck is just going to be naturally weak. Like you said, if the deck doesn't even stand a chance against Diablo, then I don't know if you can really be playing the deck, you know?
Yeah.
So it's a tough one for sure. The last thing I want to mention is Can we put an F in the chat for my beloved Amber Emerald? I think it got absolutely nothing. Absolutely nothing this and I found that interesting as well, because when I started playing that deck, like, you know, I played it for the DLC Birmingham, and I played it in the set champs. I won the set champs. There was only like 1 or 2 green steals that showed up to the you know, content creator set championships, and those games I think they went to a tie. I refuse to play Amber Emerald while green steel is as good as it is right now.
Yeah.
I was playing it in a meta where people just weren't playing green steel, and I thought the deck was really good in that meta, because against a lot of the tempo decks you can manage, against a lot of the aggro decks you can kind of get there. I'd argue now against a lot of the aggro decks now, maybe they're so fast that you really won't be able to keep up against them. But you know, Ravensburger, if you're listening, set 7. I know it's probably already made, but please give me some support. I don't even know what the deck could get now. Probably just like more interesting songs and stuff like that, because the core of that deck is very it's you can't really change too much about it, right? I think the most flexible part is the song choices that you want to run. So I'd like to see it, you know, people experiment with it a little bit, but I don't think this is the set, unfortunately. But it comes down to exactly what you said, right? I just don't think there's good enough answers for the Diablo stuff, just for the Ursa stuff as well. Like, you're in that deck, in the Amber Emerald deck, you're so board dependent that as soon as they start removing even some of your stuff, the game's over, right? So it's under the sea or bust, unfortunately. But yeah, with that, thank you so much, everybody, for watching or listening to this episode. Moyen, do you have any closing thoughts before we kind of jump into to set 6 next week? I'm excited, is all I'll say. I think there's a lot of room for experimentation, some new deck archetypes to form, and more importantly, like I was saying, I think multiple different versions of pre-existing deck archetypes, you know, multiple Ruby Amethysts, multiple Sapphire Steels. We've already seen that with the Wheel No Wheel and the Burn decks and stuff, so yeah. I'm excited.
Yeah, in general, I'm right now I'm in the phase where I'm kind of like testing everything, so any ideas you guys might have, I'm very interested in hearing them, and I likely try to explore them.
Yeah, for sure. If you guys enjoyed this episode of Podcana, be sure to leave us a review on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, your local pod platforms. There's a video version of this available over at youtube.com/@PodcanaPodcast. Hit the subscribe while you're there. Give the video a like, comment down below. Twitters are @MoyenHS and @Kawatek_CG. Thank you so much for watching. Catch you guys in the next one.